Hi, I'm Anna Marie Cox, and we will have a transformative experience.
Hi, I'm Daniel Dresner. You know, Mr. Embarrassing Intro Guy.
Welcome to Space Nation, where we look at science fiction through the lens of
Superstar economics
and Ricardian rent theory. Today, we are talking about Boot Riley's Sorry to Bother You, which is available on Prime or Pluto TV. And in the next few weeks, well, we have Poor Things on the schedule. And then, Dan, I'm going to tease the thing we were talking about.
Okay, sure. That sounds good.
As kind of a part of our anniversary celebration, we are going to look back at The Expanse at some point.
Yep.
Some people may not realize, Dan, that we started as a Expanse recap project.
It's true. Our original pairing was on The Churn for Sci-Fi, and actually, I will always be grateful to Anna because this was really your show. And then you were like, "Hey, Dan, do you want to come talk about the international relations of sci-fi?" And one thing led to another, and then we did that for a couple of seasons, and then we moved to Space the Nation.
Yeah, I think I told you. So what happened was it was going to be a show where I did recaps and did an interview with someone like from the show or related to the show or somehow topical. And then we decided we needed to do a recap of the first, I guess it was 3 seasons? No, 2 seasons.
Probably first 2 seasons.
First 2 seasons.
Because it hadn't migrated to Prime yet, right?
Right. And I thought it would be pretty boring if I just just read like a recap. Yeah. And I was like, who can I drag in to actually recap it? So all I have to do is listen and respond. Who will think it's actually a privilege to do all the work of recapping?
It is only now, 5 years later, that I realize I was the labor.
That's right. I was exploiting your labor.
You were exploiting my labor.
I was management. So I invited you on to do that. And then it went so well, I went back to sci-fi and was like, let's do this version. Like, let's make this completely different from what the show used to be, which was what I described and hosted by my friend Cher Martinetti. And the rest is Space the Nation. And I was doing a rewatch of The Expanse while I've been sick. If people can't tell, I am still sick. And I just
getting better.
I think it'd be really fun. So anyway, we used to be for The Expanse, and we were a for-profit operation then. And now we are not. Okay, let me put it differently. We would like to be
a for-profit show.
And we have various methods for doing that.
Right.
One
way, there is this concept called patronage. So if you want to be a patron of the show, you can go to our Patreon page at patreon.com/spacethenation. Lots of benefits from that. Early access to the podcast, access to our fantastic Discord channel. Also, I believe we are less than 15 patrons away from hitting 250. And if we hit 250, we are going to do a patrons-only episode on a topic chosen by the patrons. Can be about anything, almost anything. Can't quite be about...
three things. There's no Holocaust.
Things. Right.
No video games.
Yep.
No TV shows.
TV seasons.
Seasons. And no TV seasons, video games about the Holocaust. So I guess it's 4.
Which is really... No, it's 3 things, because that's a subset.
It's 3 things.
It's 3 things. Yeah.
And if you're not a patron, you may have already noticed our other method of becoming a for-profit venture, which is that we have ads. Yep. And if you're a patron, you don't know that because you haven't heard the ads. What I'm saying is, if you're a patron, you don't hear ads. And if you want to get rid of the ads, you should become a patron. Dan, are you happy about that? You've always had an eye towards the upside of this podcast more than I have.
True, Anna, but if you think about it, what really is capital, right?
Also, if you're already a patron, one way you can help us out is to do a review somewhere, wherever you get your podcasts, or not, just anywhere, I guess. Like just bathroom wall.
And the billboards,
Billboard.
Street signs,
Street sign. You could go twirl a street sign.
Crop circles, there's a lot of different ways. I would appreciate the creativity on this. T-shirts, So we have some developing news on merch, but we're not going to talk about that until
It's gonna be
2024.
a little while before we can actually share our news. Exciting
Yes.
developments are afoot, though. I'll just let people
Yeah.
use their imaginations on that. But now let's get to the meat of the matter. We're going to be talking about Sorry to Bother You. Dan, why?
I think we've been kicking this one around for a little while. I remember suggesting it at one point, and I don't know, like we hit a crunch thing or so on and so forth. But like it definitely seemed Space the Nation material.
Yes. As I believe I've mentioned, I sometimes get weirdly oppositional to recommendations. Like if
No,
people recommend
no, no, Anna. What? Sorry.
if something is recommended to me too much, then I
Mhm.
kind of double down on not wanting to see it or read it.
Right.
And for reasons that will become obvious, a lot of people recommended this movie to me.
Yes.
The same thing happened with Ted Lasso. Like I just was like, I can't. No, I no, and
When
also Lower
when you were
Decks.
describing it, I swear to God, it was like the Ted Lasso effect of like everyone tells you, oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you should absolutely do this. I had the same reaction with Ted Lasso where when they're describing it, I'm like, that sounds awful. I don't want to watch that. And then of course, the first season in particular was just wonderful.
So then, though, after we did Idiocracy,
Mhm. Yep.
I
Yep.
decided, wouldn't it be nice to do something that's a broad, maybe overly broad critique of capitalism that is not an endorsement for eugenics?
It's not an endorsement of eugenics. Eugenics, like, well, no, it doesn't
Well,
really
yeah,
appear.
it's
I
not
think
an endorsement. It is
that's true. It's
very
not an endorsement.
clearly.
Not an endorsement. That's true. Fair point. Yep.
That's a
Yep.
big difference between the two movies.
It's an important distinction. You're right. You're absolutely right on that. Yes.
They
Yes.
both involve eugenics.
That's right. Exactly. That's
One of
all
them
I'm
is
saying.
actually an endorsement.
Mhm.
Anyway, will this podcast ruin it for you? It's a really well-made movie, like
Yeah.
visually pretty stunning. So
I want to say, just for the record, I am stunned at how beautiful this movie is, given how little it cost to make it. You said,
$3
without,
million.
I'm jumping the gut. Yeah, 3 million. This is not a $3 million looking kind of movie. It is looks much more expensive than that.
Yeah. I
And I
mean,
mean
it
that.
used, used the streets of, it was filmed a lot on location. I think Boots Riley, he made his first film, Hero of Mine. I guess he would have been in his late 40s, like 47, his first
Oh, wow.
movie. Clearly had been imagining what it would look like for years and years and years. The script was written. I'll get to that in a second. More about the
Well,
script in a
yeah,
second. But I think what you can say about it is he came to this idea once, like knowing what he wanted to do. Like
yeah.
there's a very firm artistic hand guiding this.
I was going to say, I'm going to make an analogy, which I'm not entirely sure is going to hold up, and you can correct me. It's a little bit like with Joss Whedon in the musical episode, in that he's got a very idiosyncratic, but he clearly fully formed way of doing this, and it
Mhm.
leads to some truly distinctive things that I think a more conventional approach would have not yielded.
Yes, I think he did not bully his actors into good
Correct.
performances.
Yes.
And he gets
Just wanted
some
to make that clear.
great fucking performances, man. Like
Yeah.
this is everyone in this movie knocks it out of the park.
And it's a great cast as well.
It is a great
Yeah.
cast.
Yeah.
I think we kind of got into previous experience here, Dan, but
Yep.
any
Yeah, I don't need to.
details for you?
Yeah, this was a pandemic watch for me, and I really enjoyed it. I confess, I think I enjoyed it slightly less this time around. Watching it with a somewhat more critical eye. But and I'm going to say this later, the first third of this movie is just perfection, and I really enjoyed it immensely.
And as I said, so highly recommended, I resisted it. I have had a few interactions with Boots Riley on Twitter, or when I was on Twitter, had some interactions with him. He seems like a kind of person who I would probably really enjoy hanging out with. Perhaps if I'm ever in Oakland, I will connect with him through our mutual friend, W. Kamau Bell.
Who appears in the film.
Yes, and I was going to have him on my podcast, and I do not remember how that fell through, but it fell through, and I regret that now. Perhaps a future podcast.
Which does lead us to the story behind the story, and Anna, tell us more about this Boots Riley guy. I mean,
he is a fascinating dude, Dan.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, he identifies as a communist. And that is in the Wikipedia entry. He identifies as communist, which I find
really
a hilarious way of putting it.
Yeah.
And
I'm sorry, I'm just imagining a conversation between him and Bernie Sanders where, remember when in the debate Bernie refused to identify as a social democrat? He said, "No, I'm a democratic socialist," and I'm just trying to picture him and Boots Riley trying to sort this out.
And he has a fascinating backstory. His maternal grandmother was a Jewish refugee from the Holocaust who married a black man in the US and became a part of a radical theater community in Oakland. Her brother was a member of the Polish resistance to the Nazis.
Nice.
Boots was raised primarily by his father. His mother was actually a scientist and wound up working in Saudi Arabia, so didn't have a ton of I know, right? Like, whole movie could be made about his life.
Good
He's
Lord.
our age, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
His father grew up in the segregated South and became a labor lawyer and union organizer who wound up tangling with the Klan while working for the UAW in Detroit.
Is this Roots the Next Generation? Jesus Christ.
I know.
Wow.
And after he became a lawyer, he represented Black Panther members, among others, in Oakland. Boots Riley has been a protester and politically active since he was a kid, basically. He organized a walkout when the Oakland High School district was going to cut arts classes. And now I will fast forward. For most of his career, he's been a musician. His main group is called The Coup, and they actually recorded the soundtrack for this movie in 2012.
Good Lord.
Because that is when he had the script written. And and I'll finish up with the script in just a second, but to bookend the music career, he did wind up forming a group with Rage Against the Machine's Tom Morello in the world's most predictable collaboration since the war in Iraq, Dan. Thank you. I did work on that one. Maybe you should have workshopped it a little bit more. So anyway, back to the script. The script came to the attention of Dave Eggers in part because of the CD that was promoted as kind of a soundtrack to this movie that hadn't gotten made. And as a book, it was published by McSweeney's. The book of the screenplay got the attention of Forrest Whitaker, who actually has a voice role in the movie.
Yeah, he plays like one of the Equisapiens.
That's
believe.
right.
Yeah.
It started production in 2017, and fast forwarding a great deal. Sundance, got it. It won, I believe, the big award at Sundance. Yada yada yada. $3 million budget, wound up making $18 million at box office. I imagine it's made a lot more sense then. And
that is a good rate of return on capital for Boots.
Yeah. And now Riley has a limited series out on Amazon.
Really? Wow.
Otherwise known as Worry Free.
Yeah. Yep.
It's called I'm a Virgo, and it's about a 13-foot tall Black teenager who lives in Oakland.
Oh my.
It's superhero-y.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But about a lot of different things. Stars Walter Goggins as the bad guy, always fun.
Walter Goggins is great in everything. Yeah.
Great in everything. It got really good reviews. I had sort of a similar, like, wait, that looks too much like something I would like, and therefore I'm resisting it. But I will probably put it on at some point.
Okay. Anna, this is a special section, which unfortunately, we hope this is not quite a recurring feature in our podcast, but for this part, it definitely is. And it's called Ticket to Cancelvania.
Well, we can't avoid it. Yes, the Ticket to Cancelvania. Yeah.
Ticket to Cancelvania is a segment that we will always do for the podcast when we are talking about someone involved in the project we are reviewing, where, let's just say, they are either still residing in Cancelvania or got their passport stamped to spend some time in Cancelvania because of behavior that was cancel-worthy.
In this case, we have a few visitors to the DMZ, let's say.
Yeah, and we have one
permanent resident. Yeah.
Be very clear about that. Yeah.
So difficult to keep short, but I will try.
Yeah.
So the first thing we need to acknowledge is that Armie Hammer is a despicable human being. Just really trash. And a permanent resident of Cancelvania, as far as I am concerned. I don't even want to get into the specific accusations because they are horrific.
Yeah.
Both emotional and sexual violence. Just really gross. There is a 3-part documentary detailing them that, just fair warning, it does contain a critique of capitalism because it's also about his family. But it will lead to multiple Silkwood showers for anyone who watches it. It's well done, but emotionally pretty harrowing. So
yeah, I was going to say, when you told me there was a 3-part documentary, I would be like, I want to unsubscribe from whatever streaming service is airing that documentary.
Yeah, I think it's on the Discovery Network. And I will say, it has interviews with all the women involved. And So it's pretty unimpeachable.
Okay.
Now, Riley, Terry Crews, and Lakeith Stanfield have all done things they regret, let's say.
Unlike the rest of us, Anna, who have lived regret-free lives.
And most of them have to do with various aspects of what I would call Black liberation, and am somewhat sympathetic to. And also, they're all like social media stuff, which,
Yeah.
let he who has not posted something regrettable on social media,
Tweet the first storm.
issue the first ticket to Cancelvania.
Yeah.
So Riley actually had some post 9/11 comments about American imperialism that I actually think both of us now would probably co-sign.
I have nothing to say on this, but because I need to see the comments. But
oh,
sure.
right. Okay, let me just. Okay, yeah. I won't make you say your co-sign. He has some comments that seem kind of quaint.
Okay,
at this point,
fair enough.
Right? Because they're sort of generically
U.S. foreign policy, kind of thing.
Like, there's nothing that at this point would get him a lot of attention, but at that point they did lots and lots of attention. He was on Fox News. Right. And also, he's a Black liberationist communist, so just read his Twitter feed. You will get an idea of what he says that upsets people. Lakeith Stanfield, slightly more complicated. He visited and once moderated for literally a few hours a chat room on the app Clubhouse that was dedicated to Louis Farrakhan.
That entire sentence is so 2021.
I know.
Say that. But yeah.
Now, it is very important. He did not personally say anything. Nothing in it was connected to him. Mm-hmm. But you can imagine what was said.
Vividly, Anna. I can definitely imagine what that conversation was about.
You have heard the things that have been said there.
Oh, I'm sure I have.
You didn't hear them there, but you understand.
No.
He said he was more curious than anything else. And when he was moderating it, he muted the people that got out of line. Now, kind of more worrisome, depending on how willing you are to forgive a 21-year-old for being an idiot, which I know you are actually pretty willing.
Very willing to forgive 21-year-olds for being idiots. That's my job. Yeah.
He recorded a rap video in which the swastika is superimposed on his forehead. Now, let me finish.
Yeah.
So, reading a quote here, I found out that the original function or the original definition of the symbol was something completely different, that it represented the sun. So I attempted to use that meaning within the video. That was a terrible mistake.
Yes, it was. Just, nope, not going to say anything more than that. Yep, big mistake.
I'm willing to go with him on that. Like,
I'm not thrilled about that story.
No. I'm willing to say I believe the apology is genuine, even if I'm not totally buying in the entire explanation.
Right. All I will say is, once again, 21-year-olds are stupid.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Terry Crews, sort of more interesting here. He tweeted some stuff during the Floyd uprising that I'm just going to point people to because he hasn't deleted any of it. And I would say they are provocative, but not incorrect necessarily assessments of anti-racism in America.
Yeah.
I don't want to even summarize them because I think it's stuff, a person who has lived the life that he's lived has more investment and more experience to back up what he's saying. So I think it'd be inappropriate for me to try and elaborate too much or quote. He did do a whole interview on The Daily Show about it. So, and he hasn't deleted them. So I think that's kind of an important part of that story. And another thing I want to say about Terry Crews that I think is really important if people didn't already know is that during the height of the Me Too discussion, he came out about his own experience of sexual violence that he experienced at
the literal hands
hands of a Hollywood agent. Yeah.
Yeah.
And as we all know, there have not been that many male Me Too survivors that have come out. And I think someone with the kind of cultural persona of Crews to come out with this, I think was really valuable and really brave.
Yes. No, in retrospect, because I remember when that originally came out, I'm sure everyone's initial reaction was like, "What?" But he was right to bring it out, and that could not have been easy for him to have done.
Yeah, and I think he was. I'm going to read the quote because I think it's pretty compelling. The assault only lasted minutes, but what he effectively was telling me while he held my genitals in his hand was that he held the power, that he was in control. I'm not a small or insecure man, but in that moment and in that time following, I've never felt more emasculated. So
Mm-hmm.
Terry Crews, we love him.
Yep, we do.
What can we say?
We do.
All right, moving on, Dan. Let's down.
Yes, all right. We have left the Cancelvania train. Thank God. That's always a tough portion for us.
Yeah.
We are now to Chekhov's What's It? This is the thing that often appears in the first act of the film and or book that winds up being relevant later. Anna, what do you got?
Chekhov's possibly not cocaine.
That's good. That was good.
Thank you.
I have Chekhov's Garage, which I know. Yeah.
All right, Dan, why don't you go ahead and do the wrap up here, and I'm just going to put another cough drop in my mouth.
Okay.
Turn off the mic for a second.
There we go. Let's go to Act 1, Cash's Upgrade. Cassius Cash Green is living a basic economy kind of life. He lives in his Uncle Sergio's garage and drives what would be best described as a shitbox. The only thing not basic economy about Cash's life is his girlfriend Detroit, an artist and genuinely talented sign twirler. Desperate for money, Cash gets a job as a telemarketer at Regal View with the help of his cousin Sal. It's a commission-only job, and Cash stumbles at first. Langston, an older co-worker, explains that he needs to use his inner white voice. Once he harnesses it and sounds very much like David Cross, Cash starts racking up the sales. Soon, Detroit is working there too. Another coworker, Squeeze, tries to organize a union to demand better pay and working conditions. Cash and the others agree to a 20-minute work stoppage. Expecting to be fired, Cash is instead promoted to be an elite power caller. The next day, on the power caller floor, his mentor, Mr. voiced by Patton Oswalt, because the character's name is just Mr. Blank, and he actually
it's
is
bleeped.
Yes, exactly. He's in the credits. It's just listed as Mr. Ant, but he's voiced by Patton Oswalt. Tells him to always use his white voice. He is informed that at the power caller level, Regal View sells military hardware and indentured labor from the worry-free corporation to governments and other corporations. Cash is horrified right up until the moment he learns how much he'll be making. Anna, as I said, I really enjoyed the first third of this film the most, and I think it's because it's a sort of combination of the lived-in surroundings. There's some incredibly inventive visual motifs in that part. I love the Regal View, like the sort of the dingy like caller floor. Like there's stuff going on in the background that's really fun.
Dingy yet stylized, which is kind of the whole movie could be described that way.
And it also, like, just the moment when they take Squeeze out and go for drinks, like there's that like little 5-minute sequence where, they're in the car and like, Detroit has to like manually do the wipers. I don't know. It was particularly charming. And I loved how Riley shot the telemarketing room and shot how he made the first couple calls where like suddenly he like crashes into whoever is calling. That was very inventive. And I was
the invasiveness of telemarketing. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Although I did keep wondering, why was the woman who was in the middle of sex pick up the phone in the first place?
So I had that thought as well.
Okay,
and
good. Yeah.
She might not have been having a very good time.
That's fair. Oh, that's legit. That's a fair point. Yeah,
could have been looking for a distraction.
Yep. The
other thought I had was that this is, a very 2012 moment in the script, because now just no one answers any call that's not identified.
And that was another thought I had about that. But and it's weird. The movie came out, I think, in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is remarkable just in those 5 years. Yeah, you're not going to pick up a phone if it would say spam caller. That's what it would say.
Especially, I mean, I think 2018, maybe some people were still answering the phone, but
yeah.
So that makes it, it's an alternate version. It's an alternate timeline. So
right.
Maybe people don't have spam alerts on their calls at that point. Yeah, I loved the visual stuff. I also really loved Lakeith Stanfield's look. Like,
oh yeah,
he just has it's a cool, fashion statement. It's not quite realistic, right? Like, I mean, yes, you could walk around like that, but it's a inventive kind of like nerd vintage look.
Well, this also applies to Detroit as well, by the way.
Oh yeah, her look is amazing.
Oh my God, like she's just like everything. Props to the costume designers.
And that's Tessa Thompson, who just all of the acting, and I think Squeeze, played by Steve Yeun, is also amazing. I can't remember the name of his best friend, the actor who plays his best friend, but also
You
very
mean
good.
his cousin
Cousin.
Salvatore?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I don't
And
remember.
the ensemble aspect of it is amazing too, right? Like that's what you're saying about when they go out to drinks. Like there's
Yeah,
almost like an Altman-esque kind of everyone talking over each other, but you still get the dialogue. It feels like a lived-in community. It feels like people
exactly.
who know each other. Even Yoon actually fits in as someone who's getting to know them.
Right.
Like it just feels very realistic. It feels like a bunch of people who are doing this job, right? And who are making the sacrifices that they have to make.
It's Jermaine Fowler, by the way, who plays Salvador.
Yeah, Lakeith Stanfield, I
Yeah.
just think he, you
Oh,
know,
yeah. No,
he
the
makes the
acting
movie.
carries this film in a lot of ways,
Yeah,
and yeah, in some ways it's interesting because the movie obviously goes to a lot of very weird places, but I think part of the reason I liked it so much is that it starts off again in this very grounded place where like they're just all in this bar, and it was a charming. It's the realest and also the most charming sequence in the film, I would argue.
yeah. I mean, there's obviously there's stuff throughout that's a little
Yeah.
unrealistic.
Oh yeah, yeah. Obviously. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, that's when we learned about the worry-free corporation. Is like,
Right. Yeah.
and I think actually this is an important point for the whole movie kind of pivots on this, which is that his uncle, whose garage he lives in, is about to
Hmm.
be evicted if he can't pay his
Right.
mortgage, and
Hmm.
so that gives the urgency that you need for him
Right.
to make these compromises along the way.
Speaking of which, let's get to the Act Two, A Tale of Two Parties. So the labor action against Regal View escalates, but Cash is not really down with their little strike. Instead, Cash enjoys the power caller life, a new car, a new apartment, and paying off his Uncle Sergio's debts. While that's happening, however, the strike turns even more violent. Detroit breaks up with Cash after he crosses the picket line, and in the process, Cash winds up in a viral video clip getting bonked on the forehead by a striking worker with a soda can. Cash does so well that Mr. Voiced by Patton Oswalt invites him to a party thrown by plutocrat Steve Lift. Cash first stops off at Detroit's gallery opening, which includes a performance art piece in which the audience pelts her with cell phones and blood while she recites a line from Barry Gordy's The Last Dragon. Side note here, I will not lie, my friends and I in college loved watching The Last Dragon. It's a really silly film,
And
and
she
we
emphasizes one line, but she does more than one line.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Cash tries to stop it, but Detroit sends him on his way. Cleaning up after the party later, Detroit hooks up with Squeeze. Meanwhile, Cash goes to the Steve Lick party, which, trigger warning, will cause affluent white liberal viewers to squirm like they have never squirmed before. All right, Anna, to the extent that this film tries to inject some subtlety into its themes, and let's be clear, there ain't a lot of it, but I think it's the argument between Detroit and Cash about the ethics about what each of them are doing. So is Cash enabling the system or taking pride in being good at his job, which, again, Steinfeld plays incredibly well? Is Detroit truly a radical, or does selling her art implicate her as well? Or is this really a sham debate within the context of the film? And then I have a question about the rap scene, whether we but let's deal with the first thing first.
Let's go in order here.
Yeah.
I think what I would say is that there's no subtlety in the film, but that's
Yeah.
because some questions about our lot in life aren't subtle.
Mm-hmm.
What they are is complicated, and
Better way of putting it. Yeah, yeah.
And I do
You're
think that the movie portrays the complications pretty
right.
well. Now it comes up with solutions that any solution. The thing
I'm
is,
not
any
sure there are
solution.
solutions per
I'm
se.
going to say,
Yeah.
I guess any. It tries to have not what would be the right answers, responses, but any response to these complicated situations is going to be incomplete.
Yeah.
And I think Riley himself is perfectly aware of his place in the system, right? Like,
Right.
he knows that he's making this movie in the context of like capitalism and that he has to survive in that,
Yeah.
in that system as well. So that any response to it is going to necessarily be imperfect, right? Until like we have the revolution or whatever.
Right.
And so I think what's more important than like the sides that we take is the accuracy of the argument. And I think that, like you've said, I think the argument is portrayed very accurately.
Yeah.
In terms of like what are the competing forces here and where do you align yourself?
Right. And I suppose it's nice that he actually even has the competing forces. This is not Brechtian in that sense.
No.
I mean,
this is one of the places where you could compare it to Idiocracy, right? Is that he's acknowledging like you got to shrug your shoulders. I mean, like
There are times where you just have to like pay off your uncle's debts, or like, yeah, I mean, there are times where you have to do certain things. No, I think you're right. I didn't quite react to this. I did not react to this film in the way that you reacted to Idiocracy, but I wasn't as crazy about this film. But I will say it is a better film than Idiocracy, and part of it is because of that argument that they have.
And as far as the rap scene, I
Yeah,
will say I laughed out loud.
I did too. It's the one thing that I laughed at the second time. I'd forgotten about it. I was like, oh God.
It
But
is really, really funny and really
yeah,
well done. And I think
and
that
we cannot describe it.
we can describe it.
Okay.
It is he's called upon to rap, which is in itself like this this racist trope of him. He's like, I really can't, he's I'm not good at it. And Armie Hammer's character, which Armie Hammer totally knocks out of the park, and he's as many narcissists are, very magnetic, charismatic person.
I would put it as perfect casting is the word,
Yes.
Yeah.
And what I love about the rap scene is that after pressing Cash to do the performance, Cash does a bad job until he just starts saying the thing that white people can't say.
Yeah.
Over and over again.
Except then the white people say it in the film. So it's
But what I love about Armie Hammer in that moment is that he's not sure what to do. You at first.
Yes, I noticed that. Like if you when you cut to the crowd, if you watch this film, try to find Armie Hammer as this is going on. It's again a good performance.
It's a great performance. It's subtle, and he's like trying to figure out if this is something that he's going to participate in or not, and then of course he winds up doing it. That whole party is pretty amazing.
It's prescient also. I mean, it was going on at the time, but like, yeah, that let me put it this way: if the telemarketer thing has not quite aged well, that has aged extremely well.
Yeah.
That is the way I put it. All right, we need to take a break. We'll be right back after an ad that should probably be less disturbing than the worry-free ads.
I should hope.
And we're back. Let's get to Act 3,
and just a tip, if anyone wants you to sign a lifetime contract in exchange for free board and labor or for room and board, don't.
Yeah, just say no.
Yeah.
Just say no.
All
right, Act 3, let's get to the fucking sci-fi part of this film. As the Steve Lift party winds down, Mr. Voiced by Patton Oswalt drops his white guy voice and directs Cash to see Lift in the basement. After snorting a very long line of white powder in Lift's office, by the way, I also want to say the first shot of Lift's party where you see like Armie Hammer snort what might be a yard-long line of cocaine was also just like really fun.
Yeah.
After snorting a very long line of white powder in Lift's office, Cash heads to the bathroom before Lift can play his pitch video. Cash enters the wrong room and sees some pretty frightening horse-human hybrids called equisapiens.
Okay. I want to just point out, I saw this coming because when Armie Hammer says, take the jade door, one very like white person thing is to have the names of all the different shades of something, like this is sage, this is jade, This
is clearly the olive door. Why did you take the olive door, not the dish door? Yeah.
This is the mint green doors. They're all different kinds of greens. Anyway, I thought that was funny.
Lift retrieves Cash and makes his pitch. Worry-Free wants to make their indentured workers stronger and more profitable by having them snort a gene-altering substance and transform them into equisapiens. Cash understandably freaks out that what he just snorted was in fact that stuff, but Lift assures him it was cocaine. To stay ahead of any labor uprising, Lift offers Cash $100 million to become an equisapien for 5 years and act as a false revolutionary figure to keep the employees in line. Cash refuses. The next day, he connects with Detroit again, and she shows him a video message his phone sent revealing the equisapiens.
I was just going to say, like, very unsubtle things, but I think the unsubtlety is part of the story, right?
Oh, sure.
Like the equisapien, the fact that they're horses and hung like horses is not subtle.
No, it's not.
And it's also played for laughs, which
it is. I did laugh at the scene where like Cash is asking Detroit to inspect his,
Yeah.
hardware store
And
to
then he
see whether
says
it's
also, "What? Can you just make me look at the nostrils while you're
yes,
making me?"
yes. It's a good line. It's a good line. But actually, this raises a question. So there's obviously we are now deep into the critique of capitalism portion of this film, but I do want to ask whether we should talk about Tessa Thompson's
Of
character
course,
Detroit.
yes.
She
Talk.
does a tremendous amount with what she's given. I'm not sure she entirely makes sense as a character. Like,
And she's the only
I'm,
woman. I mean,
I
like,
guess,
oh, except I guess
yeah,
actually Kate Berlant. I mean, the cast is stacked. Like even the
yeah,
minor roles.
right.
It plays like a HR ish person.
Yeah, sort of like comes in to like help with the telemarketing. She's actually really good. Again, also someone who does a tremendous amount with not
With
a
almost
lot.
nothing, but yeah. But Tessa Thompson is magnetic as she
Oh
usually
God,
is. Very
yes,
sexy, very cute.
yep,
And also, I would say, again, with the not much she's given, she feels like a force.
yeah. That's
She
that's what.
feels like an equal partner to
Mhm.
Cash. I mean, more than, I mean, what's more than equal? I guess equal.
Unequal would be more than
Yeah,
but
right. But she feels like an
yeah.
equal partner. She has agency.
Hmm.
Their relationship, like everything else in the film, has a lived-in quality to it that makes you understand like why she stays with him, not just for the bennies, you know?
Hmm.
It feels like they really do care for each other and that her confrontation with him feels like an argument that a couple would have.
Yes, it does. That's actually correct.
And then
Um,
also that she doesn't like storm out, you know?
mhm.
It's not played for she has such high ideals like she's walking out. It's more like I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think
No,
there's a difference.
you're right about all. No, there is a difference, and I think I agree with you. What I agree with you is that Tessa Thompson's amazing in this.
Yeah.
It was just that I felt like I wanted to actually. I think the way I would put it is that she was so good. I wanted to know about her a little more
Yeah, I'll
as
agree
an
with you
individual
there. I
character.
mean, I think
That's
that
that's probably
she comes off as an equal partner in the relationship, but she's not a co-star. I mean, she's a
right.
like literally a co-star, but it's not her story.
It's not her story. Yeah, I guess that's. I
And
guess
her
that was the
story is
thing.
not her story is not given equal weight, and she's good
Yeah.
enough in it that yes, I would watch a documentary about her character.
Right. Okay. All right.
I would
Let's
watch
get
like a
to
PBS, behind the artist kind of like piece about her.
let's get to Act Four, and I apologize for this, Anna. Say nay to exploitation. Taking advantage
Sorry,
of
I
his
had to mute myself to cough, so instead I'll laugh now, Dan. Ha ha.
yeah, taking advantage of his. Oh, all right. Taking advantage of his meme fame, Cash goes on the TV show I Got the Shit Kicked Out of Me and agrees to be humiliated in return for getting to play his Equisapien video and shock the world with Worry Free's plans. The plan backfires, however, when the media treats Equisapiens as a groundbreaking scientific achievement, and both Worry Free's stock and Steve Lift's cult of personality take off.
How'd this survive the 10 years before
Yeah,
the movie was written and now, Dan?
yep. Okay, as I said, totally fair.
How'd this
That part is
age?
aged well. Yep. Cash apologizes to Squeeze and Sal and hatches a plan to take a final stand against Regalview. The picket line holds out against the first round of police violence, but cracks when the police really start to riot and detain Cash. Things are looking bleak, but Cash had previously freed the Equisapiens from Lift's compound. They overpower the police and free Cash. The telemarketers get their union, and Cash and Detroit get their union too. They move back into Sergio's garage with some somewhat nicer stuff. The movie ends with Cash suddenly starting to grow a horse snout and leading a mob of Equisapiens into Lift's house, and I don't think they're going to be all MLK in how they treat Steve.
No, there's gonna get
Uh,
Black Panther on his ass. That's what
yeah,
that's
yeah.
what I say.
And I think in the end, I again, I like this film. I didn't love it, but I liked it. But I do think the sci-fi portions of this film work the least well, I guess would be the way I put it.
It's hard for me to say because I actually think in some ways they are a pretty cohesive part of it. Like
Yeah,
it's not the sci-fi stuff, the Equisapien stuff to say.
yeah.
It doesn't feel like it's tacked on, you know.
No, it doesn't feel like it comes out of nowhere.
It
Let's put it that way.
it's
Given the film sets. Like this way, by the time you figure that's what's going on, not the most shocking reveal would be the way.
it's also been so absurdist
Yeah, yeah,
that by the time you get to the horse people, it doesn't
Mhm.
feel like you've gone that far from the universe that we're already in,
Right.
right?
The Riley versus this is not a deviation from the Riley verse.
Right. And that's one of the things I think that makes him like, I really am inspired by the fact that he didn't make his first film until he was in his late 40s and he made this, you know.
Yeah,
And
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 it's very inventive. Yeah.
and it makes me, I am interested. I'm more I think about it more. I really I will watch his Amazon show, and it is hilarious that it's all on Amazon. And I'm sure he's done interviews about it. There's a lots of this is one of those movies too, and I think we talked about this with Nope, where I started looking at essays about the film. And I remember asking the question when we discussed Nope, is it good or bad when you see a film and you're like, I want to read some essays about that?
I think the answer is it's usually good. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's not good because sometimes it's like,
What
I mean, I've
happened?
done
Explain that to
right,
me. Yeah.
right, or I've done that with the way I would say is I've sometimes done that with movies that other people have really liked and I've watched it and it's left me cold. This was not one of those films. As I said, I did like it. So
Yeah, there's some great essays and some interesting profiles of Boots Riley that I read after this. There's a good piece in the Boston Review where I found out more about him and it's pretty thorough exploration of the movie's themes. So I don't know, like, I mean, I think I just liked it
yeah,
better. And I think that to the extent it has flaws, I'm I think it might have a little bit to do with the writing in the last two thirds more than the actual events, because the writing feels less clever to
oh,
me.
well, it also gets visually a little less clever. Like I
Yeah,
mean, because in the first third, when those telemarketers cut,
it's not a plot. It's not the
yeah,
parts that are the problem. It's that it doesn't feel as real in part because
yeah.
some of the character relationships don't carry the same
No,
way.
that's true. The way I would almost describe it as, again, this is the professor in me. It's like a paper where the quality of it is pretty good, but it's clear that the writer really went over that first, like the introduction in the first couple
Yeah.
paragraphs, where it's like, oh, this is really sterling stuff, and then the rest of it is like it's good, but you can see where they should have like done another revision. You know, that's
Yeah,
the way I
that's
would put
actually
it.
that's I think that's a very good
Yeah,
comparison. I think that this is one of those things, and I will confess as someone who
yeah,
writes that sometimes the first third of a piece I've thought about it a
right.
ton and I know what I'm going to say and I write it and it's really powerful, and then you have to draw it all together and it starts to kind of fall apart in your
Yeah,
head
yeah. Well, also, like, I think
and you just do the best you
Wait, wait,
can.
wait. If there is a part of a movie that you want to be that good, it should be the first part of it because you want to grab the reader, or you want like in terms of both the writing
Yeah.
and viewing. So again, but yeah, that was the sort of wrap up I had on.
And I think what I said about how the relationships don't carry as well, there's a couple of moments I think I feel that way because it starts to be more about just cash and just
Yeah,
lift, right? But the scenes with his friends actually work really well. There, the scene when he apologized to his friend and his friend is kind of like, you don't need to apologize.
yeah,
I
that was
loved.
good. Where Sal does it, yeah, exactly. That was that.
And this is kind of weird, but it's like you know, what is the opposite of the Chekhov's gun? It's like Dostoevsky's like handkerchief or something. When the hookup with Squeeze amounts to nothing.
Yeah, that was it. Was interesting that.
I liked
Okay.
that.
And in some ways, it was. I liked the way they dealt with it. I guess
That felt
that did
real to
feel real.
me.
Actually, that's a good point. It's true.
And it's a little weird. It's but it's not out of left field. It's
Oh
totally
no,
set
no,
up that she hooks
it's
up with
clearly.
him. But it doesn't have to mean anything. That also I kind of
And I
liked.
think that was actually oddly the point of the film because, like, clearly Riley shoots it so that that was an unsurprising plot development, and then it gets resolved, and
Right.
it's like it was sort of. In some ways, I think you're right that he surprised me in terms of how that got resolved, but I also agree with you. Kind of an interesting way to resolve it in the end.
Yeah. Where and where everyone's just kind of okay
Yeah,
with it. Like, you know, and they were broken
yeah,
up.
they were on a break. Yeah.
So anyway. Oh, Dan, I have a
Oh, yeah,
question.
please.
Sorry. I am sick. Sometimes, you know, not thinking straight, lots of cough
Don't worry
medicine.
about it.
Is there IR in this
We're not mapping the fucking human genome here, Anna.
movie?
Of course, there's some IR in this film, but it's pretty crude. I mean, I'm not going to lie. It's not like, I think we agree that this film is clever but not subtle.
Yeah.
And, the IR is about at that level. It's not sophisticated. So surprisingly, Boots Riley is a huge fan of the military industrial complex as a thing. Yep, that's there. The idea that power callers are trying to get government contracts through cold calling is,
No, Dan, that's the joke. It's a
I
joke.
know, but
It's not. It's
yeah,
yes, it is
yeah,
absurd.
yeah,
The whole point of
right,
it is that, but like the idea, I think, is that people are so willing to take, slave labor that you could cold
yeah,
call. You could cold call a government and be like, "Hey, I have some slave labor to sell you." Oh, that sounds
yeah.
awesome. I will take
But
X
yes,
however many
military.
metric tons of slave
It's a
labor.
military industrial complex thing. Divide and conquer strategies to keep restive populations quiescent. Absolutely. The TV shows, the media, nothing you have not seen in Paul Verhoeven's work before or others. The one step forward, I do think it was the idea of like, we want you, Cash, to play the sort of docile leader. Although I have to say, I guess the way to put it is that it would make sense that Steve Lift would think MLK was an example of that, when in fact MLK was
Yeah.
actually way more radical than that.
Well, he's believing like the sanitized
Right,
version of
exactly, yeah.
MLK.
So that,
Yeah.
I will say, in some ways, there is a line in this film that I really liked, and like is in some ways
Oh,
worthy of
yeah.
its own conversation, which is I think when towards the very end, Cash finally apologizes to Squeeze and to Sal, and it's Squeeze's explanation for why there's no spontaneous outrage at the Equisapien video, and he says if you get shown a problem but have no idea how to control it, then you just decide to get used to the problem. And that's actually a pretty sophisticated point about structure and agency. I actually really like that point.
I mean, we talk about this a fair
Yeah.
amount. I mean, especially when it applies to climate
Yeah.
change. Like, I really like Squeeze's organizing approach. I think I think he does a great
I knew you
job.
were going to
I
love
think the
Squeeze. Watch it.
scene
Yeah.
of the work stoppage is actually pretty empowering, and he's a good labor organizer.
Well, he succeeds in the end, to be fair. They do unionize, so like props to Squeeze.
Yeah.
Also, props to Stephen Yoon. Again, like I think we're in agreement on this. Like, it's interesting that he appears in both this and Nope. He's got
Yeah.
he really does know. He can do a lot with the role.
Yeah, and I don't want to forget to recommend the show Beef, which he's in, and he's amazing.
Oh, with Ali Wong, that's right.
He's so good. Oh, you've seen it?
I've seen one episode. I could not stand more of it, which is not to say that
it's
bad.
very disturbing.
Yeah, that's why I couldn't stand it. Like it was again well done, but I didn't want to watch anymore.
If you can get through it, it's worth it.
Okay.
The where it goes, it is one of the most uncomfortable shows I've ever watched, and there's some cancellation issues or some Cancelvania issues. But I would, if you already have Netflix, you've already paid, the residuals, then
all right,
maybe go ahead and watch it.
I will consider this.
I really love that line. I think that line is emblematic of kind of the things that Riley's trying to do here.
Right, I agree. And like, in a weird way, the line is actually underutilized in the film. It's a great little moment, but I actually kind of wish like that was the one moment where I wanted a little more like of a build up to that line.
Yeah.
But it's the best line in the movie in some ways. Anna, I don't know if I have a question for you this time around. Because how do I put this? I was going to ask you if there was a critique of capitalism in this film, and I can't ask that question because, the ghost of Milton Friedman would have watched this film and started to despise capitalism. Like, it's obviously...
You're giving the film a lot of credit, but I think that he would have at least had some... He would have gone back over his hypotheses.
Right, yeah, he would have at least...
He would have checked it out.
Would have checked his work. That's all I'm saying. Yeah.
So, Dan, I'm going to make you a proposal.
Okay. All right.
I can see you're going to want to say that. But I wouldn't do that before you see what I'm offering, which is a chance to just skip what I need to say here about whether or not there's a critique of capitalism, what I usually do. Yeah. And let's just skip to like the level of its success or kind of how we feel coming away from it. We already talked a little bit about, but maybe just go into a little bit more. You and I chatted about this, but haven't talked about yet, a comparison between this and Don't Look Up.
Right. So neither of us were huge fans of Don't Look Up. I think it would be safe to say.
Yes.
I think we did talk about it in one episode. Don't Look Up has the same problem of some things we have talked about before, which is given the talent that was involved in that film, it should have been way, way better than it actually was. And
Hmm.
also the overarching theme is, it's not just not subtle. I don't think it's very,
Yeah, I mean, I
yeah.
think. Hope people can see why I think of them as worth
Yeah.
comparing, which is to say that they are, overt message
Hmm.
movies
Right.
made by talented directors with a talented
Hmm.
cast with a very specific thing they want to say, like very specific thing they want to say. And I think the point of comparison where obviously Don't Look Up fails, but this I think works, is that Don't Look Up, I think, assumes that the viewers need to be convinced and wants to like make this like over bang you over the head
Right.
argument of its own
Yeah.
righteousness. And this movie doesn't take it for granted. I think that people are going to agree.
Hmm.
And also kind of is like, look, here's what I'm
And
saying.
yeah, the way I would put it is this movie is weirdly more self-confident in that
Yeah.
it says you might not agree.
Yeah.
Also, if you don't agree, don't care. Like
Yeah.
this is the argument I'm making, and in some ways that actually makes it, even if you don't agree with it, a movie that you can respect. Yeah,
Enjoyable.
I agree. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
It makes it and you feel that as you're watching
yeah.
it, which I think for me, like even though I basically agree with everything in
Hmm.
it, like I didn't feel like I was being, the choir being preached to, which is what Don't Look Up feels
Yeah.
like. It's like, I mean, look, I'm singing with you. I am the
Hmm.
choir. Like here I am with my hymn book.
It's the
And
Stephen
yet,
King thing.
you know, uh,
It's like you talked about this
yeah,
with Stephen King also. It's the same sort of thing. Whereas this movie, there is a self-assuredness to it that even if, and again, I can't quite go as far as Boots Riley goes, obviously, but
yeah.
I respect the vision, I guess would be the way to put it, in a way that I don't quite with Don't Look Up.
And also I feel like he wanted to make a movie that people are going to enjoy even if they don't agree.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like in that way, that's sort of the interesting, like where he sees his place in the capitalist system.
and
Like,
it actually fits with Detroit in the film also in some ways. And
yeah,
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 no, no,
yeah,
no,
yeah,
I never occurred to me until we were talking about this, but it's true. Like Detroit is also an artist where, and one moment Cash says, you sell this art to rich people, but I think you're right that Boots Riley, I think, is self-aware enough to know what he's doing, and also knows at some point this is what you're going to have to do.
yeah, and that it, but has confidence in his
Right.
message.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
where I think that's also what Detroit eventually, where you can see she kind of lands, which is, look, I believe in my
Right.
message. Rich people are going to buy
Hmm.
it.
Yeah.
Okay, like it doesn't dilute my
Hmm.
message. It doesn't inherently dilute my message. I'm aware of the
Hmm.
contradictions. Here we go. Yeah, I think I really want to interview him.
Good.
He seems like a totally cool guy. I don't know. I mean,
I
I
will
also
say
had stuff.
it's funny that we talked about beef also because I mean I read a little bit about him. He has multiple beefs with multiple directors. He has
Yeah.
gotten into it with Spike Lee. He's got into it Michelle Gondry, which is another film that, or like director that this there's some, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Michelle
Huh.
Gondry, who some of the visual stuff is inspired by his work.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. The
Right,
claymation
the
stuff.
claymation stuff. So I don't know if you noticed this. I read this in the little trivia. He wanted to. He basically asked Michelle Gondry, "Can I say this claymation video was made by you, or something?" Or like wanted to do an homage to him.
I want to do an homage, not made by you. I don't think he wanted to say it was made
Well,
by
he
you.
wanted to use Michelle Gondry's name, and
Yeah.
and Michelle Gondry basically was like, no, I'm not cool with that actually." And so
Huh.
Riley changed the name to Michelle Dongry, and is basically like said in any film or anything he wants to make, he wants to insult Michelle Gondry every time. Like he didn't take it well, would be the way I would put
I admire that level of pettiness, won't lie.
it.
As a confirmed grudge holder
Okay.
myself, one of the big pro it is a character defect that I will confess to is I sometimes hold
You hold
needlessly
you hold
long
on to beef.
grudges.
Yes.
I love to beefs, but he just seems like a really interesting
Yeah.
guy. I also did weird, like, and when I was like, I think I've told this story. hopefully not too many times, but like my first instance of political activism was during the Reagan-Carter campaign,
Huh.
where I played Carter in my school mock election.
Oh, oh, Anna, I'm sorry because I know how this ends.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's the really tough part of the story, which is my mom helped me write my speech. And I talked about salt too.
Wow. Wow.
My best friend played Reagan,
Oh,
and it's a totally accurate. Like, I need to make a movie about this because there's a reason why Alexander Payne has already made the movie, but my competitor talked about longer recesses, better lunch.
Yep. Election is that
Yeah.
film. Yeah.
Yeah. Election is that movie.
All right.
So I think that he and I would have a lot to talk about. Capitalism grinding.
It's time for Discordant Notes. This is when we take a question from our Discord, from our patrons, that they ask and then answer it on the podcast. So Jim Rubel asked this question, which is, between this film and They Clone Tyrone, which one is the more contrived big reveal at the end?
This is not even a reveal, is it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not sure They Clone Tyrone.
I'll go with contrived. Yeah. I'll go with
contrived. Is the I think the key thing. And I got to say, like, this is where we might disagree. It's a tough call. But They Clone Tyrone, I don't know, I found slightly more, but like it's judging between two absurdist things.
Yeah, like
I don't know.
Like, what's the contrivance here? Is it the presence of Equisapiens, or is it the Equisapiens coming in and saving the day?
Oh no, it's the Equisapiens, the very existence of Equisapiens.
It's just the reveal that they exist.
Yeah, I think that's.
Yeah, I don't think this is actually. I wouldn't even say that's that contrived. I think that They Clone Tyrone, like, that's the big weakness of that film, which we both enjoyed very, very much.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to compare the two, they could exist in the same cinematic universe.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
They're not actually, they're kind of, I mean, you could almost argue in dialogue with each other. I would love to see a panel conversation between the directors of those two movies.
Actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they're taking I could propose that panel for South by, but then I'd have the problem of trying to get in touch with the directors, which who knows? Which is a better movie, do you think? I'll let you go first. I actually have an opinion.
I think I have an opinion too. We might be in agreement. I think Sorry to Bother You is the better film.
Oh, interesting. I actually think They Clone Tyrone.
Oh, really? Okay.
I think they're both very good.
They're both very good.
I think They Clone Tyrone is actually more cohesive.
Okay, yes. Thank you. All right. I think we're actually in agreement on this in the sense of, as a film, They Clone Tyrone fits well. I think, however contrived the plot was, the writer and the director thought about how to end it and so on and so forth. But as I said, I really like the first third of this film. It's just so fucking inventive, and yeah, that's like the highs of this film.
They are such a great double feature. Yeah. I mean, and what I would say about both of them, and what makes it hard to pick the better one, is that they both have a similar level of energy to them. Like energy and inventiveness and the world that they've created.
The one thing I will say is, like, we talked about this when we talked about They Clone Tyrone. John Boyega is so goddamn amazing in that film. Like, and everyone in this film is also really good, but like John Boyega in that film is just. You know what I wish? I wish it was John Boyega. I want to see a film with John Boyega and Tessa Thompson in it. I want to see a charisma off.
And speaking of charisma, Donald Glover was was supposed to be the Heath Stanfield,
yes,
which on the charisma charts.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, yeah.
That it goes to 11.
Yeah,
like.
Yeah, but Lakeith Steinfeld is very good in this as well. Just to be clear,
he's so good, and actually, to a certain degree, like his hangdog kind of
was actually appropriate for the performance. It was right for the character. Like, these are different characters.
His hangdoggedness.
Yeah. So like Boyega is supposed to be what he's doing, and Steinfeld is what he's supposed to be doing. So yeah, they're just different roles. Oh wait, what's that? Oh.
It's Coke cans being thrown at people.
Yeah. Ow! 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 Ow!
That shouldn't be funny. But you saying "ow" was funny to me.
It's the debris
field. That's the cough syrup talking.
Yeah. into the refield. This is when, we talk about the things that we didn't get to, or in the case of Anna, who is high on cough syrup, has forgotten that she is brought up in the first place.
Yeah. I got some stuff. Yeah, I got some stuff.
I have a few things, but why don't you go first?
So stick to the script is a thing that they say in the call center. And I find that funny, or it's meaningful in the context of the movie, because the script requires you to improvise. The script that they're given in the call center actually requires you to improvise, but what you're supposed to say is left up to you, which is, that's how capitalism works too. Like, there's a thing you're supposed to do. We're not going to tell you exactly what it is. You have to do it, and you will be judged on whether or not you do it correctly, but we are not going to tell you exactly what it is. I think that's a level of power that we get in late capitalism, or late capitalism has over us. So I think that's I don't know, intentional or not, but loved it.
Other things in the script that I really liked. One was the original conversation between Langston, who's played by Danny Glover, and Lakeith Steinfeld about what it means to have a white voice. And I love the line from Langston.
Oh, this was actually for me too.
Where it's where he says, it's not really a white voice, it's what they wish they sounded like. And I was like, damn, okay, that's good. That's again, I think that might actually be the most subtle thing in this film, in the sense of that actually was a subtle point that
that's sort of in the same spirit of stick to the script. We're not going to tell you what the script is.
Yeah.
It's good. You have this thing to aspire to. We're not going to ever really tell you if you've gotten there, but it's a thing you think you should be trying to do, but the parameters of it are left up to power, and you're never going to know. And that's also what, that's what race is in general, is this fictional set of characteristics that everyone's kind of trapped in, but never sure if they're doing correctly. And I also really like that. There is a point at which I believe I can't remember what they're comparing when they say it's comparing apples to the Holocaust.
Oh God, I don't even remember that, but I do remember the Holocaust line and laughing at it. Yeah.
And when one can laugh at a punchline that involves a Holocaust, it's a good joke. Go ahead. I actually have a lot here. Go ahead.
The other just another line I liked, and again, I'm sorry, I'm going to pay a compliment to Arnie Hammer, but when he says, we still need the workers to do the work, and then he adds per se, and I laughed when he said per se. It was the perfect way of delivering that line. It was just, again, sorry, he's a horrible human being, but he's a good actor, and it was a good line.
Our policy on this show is we don't want to enrich people who are residents of Cancelvania, but we are not going to necessarily bar all discussion or conversation. So I love that the manager at the call center is a tatted up punker.
The three of them, again, part of the reason I think I like the first one.
One of them actually literally has an anarchy tattoo on his neck.
I kind of missed them when the film, when he goes up to the power caller level, we stopped seeing that floor. And I think that was one of the things I was sad by. I liked that, all of them there. That was really interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. One other thing I liked, the compliment off between Sal and
apparently based on thing that Boots does with his friends.
Yes, but it was just legit funny. It was very funny, and as someone who has is a guy and has testosterone, I like the spin on that. I wasn't expecting it, and it was just delightful. So well done.
I have a couple lines written from that. I hope your year is great and you smell nice.
Yes, you smell nice. You smell nice too. I'm just using soap. It was good. Yeah.
Let's see. I do have written in my notes, would anyone really notice a telemarketer strike?
I did kind of.
The management would. Management would,
but that's it.
But yeah.
Again, not subtle, but I didn't. But well done. Was the media covering the strike? I did like the line. Oh, looks like the cavalry showing up in the form of the police. That were functioning as strike breakers, but it was just sort of make it clear that's how some of the media would have covered it.
All of Armie Hammer's explanations for the Equisapien thing are things that white people say to black people when they're trying to cover or explain something racist. I can't let you leave without explaining everything. It's all just a big misunderstanding.
Okay, that's good.
I didn't want you to think I was doing this for no reason. and finally, I'm not evil.
I was in like a permanent state of cringing the entire sequence, like that the whole party and then that reveal sequence.
That scene, it is what Armie Hammer does in that scene that's particularly
Mhm.
great is his earnestness,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And like and this is another reason why it's like it's a metaphor for when white people have done something terrible and are trying to tell a black person how it's not really
It's not
as
as
bad as
terrible as
they
you think.
think.
Yeah, because I was doing it from sincere motives. Right.
Yeah. I didn't mean evil.
Evil just happened.
I have another thing about that particular scene, which this is is just personally bothering me, is that so he goes to the reason he finds the Equisapiens is he has to use the
Hmm.
bathroom. And it is very funny that Armie Hammer says, do you still have to go to the bathroom? And then he's like, well, I pissed myself.
Yeah.
But then he just has piss pants for the rest of the scene. Like that kind of bothered me. I have a couple more things. Do you have anything else?
I have two last things. So one thing I will say is,
Okay, I have two.
okay,
So you go and I go.
okay.
You
I
go.
think I've said this before, but again, like Tessa Thompson, both the wardrobe that she gets is amazing. Also, she's a really good sign twirler. Like I know this doesn't I like knowing that in case everything breaks down, she's got a backup career. But like
It does look like she's doing
really,
it. I don't know for
yeah, I
sure,
don't know.
but there is a point where Steve Yoon does it, and I think
Oh
that
no,
was a
there was a
body
stunt.
double.
Like there was a scene where he does something, and
Yeah.
that was clearly a stunt double. But like when Tessa Thompson's doing it, I didn't. I it looked like it was her. So,
It could not have been
yeah,
her.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so there is a good line that now so again, I'm going to plead cough syrup to not remembering
Mm-hmm.
some of this. So I don't know I don't remember exactly the context of this line, but it is like a cunning raccoon or a snake or a tardigrade.
Great, yes.
And any mention of tardigrade, I mean, you're going to get bonus points from me.
My last thing, there were a lot of cameos in this film, the voice cameos in particular. So shout out to both David Cross and Patton Oswalt, who do the white people voices for two of the leading characters, but also Rosario Dawson is the voice in the elevator, which she had one or two lines that made me laugh about the brain. And in the claymation video, Lily James does the voiceover for that.
No, she does the voiceover for Tessa
Oh, is
Thompson,
that it? Oh, I'm
artists.
sorry. Okay, sorry, I apologize. Yes.
Yeah, she's the voice for when Tessa Thompson is doing
Her like
performance art
the white
piece.
voice. Yeah.
Only thing I have left is at one point they measure how much something costs in white babies.
That was good. That was good. Yep.
They say that's the cost of 4 white babies, which I now cannot recall like what. You know what? I'll do a final thing because I have written because I drew in my notes the signs that Tessa Thompson. We keep on saying she's a sign twirler. They are marvelously decontextualized. I think at one point one of the signs just says sign.
Oh God, that could be right. I don't even remember. Wow.
So again, as the person who, when I lived in Berkeley, had a self-inking stamp that said irony, it is something it made my heart trip a little bit. So I think that brings us to the end of our discussion of this particular movie, Dan.
I believe that is correct. You can always reach us on social media. We are on Blue Sky. I am at Dan Dresner. She is at Anna Marie Cox. We're also doing other things. Anna, you are on Instagram. You have a website, pronounced
I have a website.
www.annamaricox.com.
Spelled the same.
Yep. Pronounced differently. Do you have any?
You are on Threads.
I am.
Substack.
I am on Substack. I have a review.
Just everyone know we've had the conversation.
Yes.
Dan and I have had the difficult conversation. He knows everything.
I'm also like there's some organizing going on. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Yeah. All right. But you know what? Much like, Boots Riley would say, like you got to participate in the system to survive sometimes. So
do you have anything coming out that we should know about?
Yes, I do. My writing workshop will start up in January, and I think this is a first time I'm going public with this, so now I really have to do it. In January, I will be rolling out a limited edition newsletter.
Ooh, okay.
Called Step Zero.
Ah.
And it will be kind of a gentle way through the 12 steps, like it's just a series of essays about the 12 steps. Mm-hmm. Which, are born out of AA, but apply to a bunch of different 12-step groups. And it'll just be like an email a week for 12 weeks. And
that's great.
Not really like a traditional newsletter. Jess, who is our sometimes kind of helper on this stuff, she keeps calling it a class. And I'm like, no.
call it a short course.
Oh, okay.
Do it that. Call it a
Cool.
short
That
course.
is basically just a series of essays with like some journal
Oh,
prompts
okay.
for people that are interested in the spirituality of the 12
That's
steps.
great.
You can go to my website, Anna Marie Cox, or sorry,
AnnaMarieCox.com. Yeah.
I don't think we have anything on there yet, but just keep an eye.
I have a piece that is probably now out in Foreign Policy, the website, the review of Frederick Mount's book, Big Caesars and Little Caesars. So, yeah.
Sorry. Dan could, if he could throw something at me right now, he would.
Yep. So this.
All right, cool,
Yep.
Dan. Dan, congratulations on making it through this semester.
Thank you, Anna. It is, yes, by the time listeners hear this, the semester will be over. It'll be all done but the grading. And yeah, it's been a tricky semester for a variety of reasons, mostly having to do with the world. So
Yeah, the world.
yeah.
It's out there.
Mhm.
Cough syrup. Not a terrible solution. Well, actually, it's a terrible
It's
solution.
not a
Never
good
mind. I can't wait to
long-term
get off of
solution.
it.
I'm just going to say that. Kids, don't do the cough syrup.
It's a temporary. It's a very
Yes.
temporary solution.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it.
And I'll be off it next week. Hopefully more coherent. Until next time.
Keep this channel open for more.